Okay, seems like a good time to get started. Right now we are going to be talking about the algebra of functions. And the algebra of functions is fairly straightforward when we realize that, once again, you have to realize that things that are equal are interchangeable. I think I just misspelled that, but whatever. So with this, we're the idea behind what is the algebra of functions, we have things like this. When we say, well, what happens when I add two functions? What happens if I take two functions, f and g, and I add them? If I do just f plus g of x, this is just whatever function I have for f of x plus that function for g of x. If I'm doing subtraction, well, I would simply subtract the two functions. Now, as always with subtraction, you need to sort of watch your signs, because if there's a more complex expression here, we might need to distribute a negative. But this general concept is pretty straightforward. With multiplication, and I want you to be very careful with this notation. If I have multiplication, we're going to have a single dot here in the center. There is another thing that we can do where we have a circle there, and that's a composition that's a little bit different. But this is where I just take two things and I am going to multiply them together. f of x times whatever that function of g of x is. And with division, if I have an f over g of x, I usually throw a set of parentheses around that to make it clear. This is just whatever function of f of x divided by whatever function we have for g of x. Now, these things, it's like, okay, well, what do we mean by this? And I'm going to start off by giving us some very, very simple examples on these. I'm going to wait till our next video to give us a little bit more in-depth and complex examples, but we're going to do this right now. Let's give you guys some examples of these things right here. So let's start off by saying, something like, let's say we're given that f of x is equal to something like x squared minus 3. And I'm also going to give us that g of x is equal to x plus 2. Okay. Well, when I do this, addition, I'm going to move this out of the way here. When I do this addition, this f plus g of x, that's just going to be, remember, our thought process here is that we've got this f of x plus our g of x. Well, our f of x is just that x squared minus 3, and our g of x is simply this x plus 2. Oh, so this is just going to be x squared minus 3 plus our x plus 2. Or when I put this all together, I'll have x squared plus x minus 1. And you'll see that we get this minus 1 by doing negative 3 plus a positive 2. For subtraction, f minus g of x. Again, we're taking this function of f of x here and subtracting from it g of x. So I've got that x squared minus 3, and I'm going to subtract from that this x plus 2. And like I say, here's where we need to watch our signs. So I'm not subtracting this one from that. So I still have this x squared minus 3, but now this is going to be minus x minus 2. I'm distributing this negative through. So I've got x squared minus x negative 3 plus a negative 2 is going to be negative 5. When I multiply, when I do this f times g of x, this is where I take my function of f of x, which, as we already said, was that x squared minus 3, and I multiply it by x plus 2. And I'm also going to give us the little side note here that we need to remember to FOIL. Because here, this isn't just going to be, I've seen some pretty exotic answers when people try to multiply. But remember, we're just taking this, top, or this first number, and we're distributing it into that second set of parentheses. So that's going to be x squared times x is going to be x cubed. X squared times 2 is going to be plus 2x. And then these last two terms, negative 3 times x and negative 3 times 2. So I've got to have minus 3x minus 6. And oops, I missed something here. When I first did that x squared times x, that should be x cubed. X squared times 2 should be 2x squared. So at this point, I am done with that one, and I don't need to do anything else. We had one last thing to finish out our quick example, and that was our division. So we had f over g of x. Now, if I had that g over f, I would just reverse the direction of this, but no worries. So once again, remember that our f function was that x squared minus 3, so this is going to be x squared minus 3. Our g of x was x plus 2. And at this point, if I could factor and reduce, I would. This top expression is the only thing that could potentially be factored, since I've got a squared term here and I don't have any greatest common factors. At this point, this is done. I can't reduce anything here. So that is all we have for this. I will stop here, and I will catch you in the next video with some examples of our algebra of functions. We do have one more that we're going to do, and that's going to talk about composition. Alrighty, catch you in the next video.